Good evening, everyone. Um, I wanted to give a brief summary of my research over the last few weeks. Um, it was a bit of a challenge finding the appropriate topic, but the reality of it is it was in front of my face all along. Whenever I talk about my experience as a foreigner coming to the United States, um, I always reference the fact that I did an African American history course and how it impacted how I viewed um, Black America, just as a whole. Um, and so I guess the most appropriate topic would be addressing my experience and how I feel that it manifests itself in the African American community. So, my broader topic is exploring African heritage, um, and specifically how African Americans conceptualize race, or the black race, within our communities and within our culture, within their communities and within their culture. So, I started off by looking at our connection to Africa, um, the transition um, that Africa has made, being, I guess, conceptualized as the dark continent, um, and how problematic that train of thought has been, how it has impacted how we view Africa as a whole. Um, so I looked at our connection to the continent of Africa. I explored much of Africa's history, and then I transitioned into a topic talking about how we became disconnected from Africa, how as slaves we were meant to believe that our masters were doing us a favor in taking us from the continent of Africa and us now being enslaved on these plantations. Um, so it was that changing of the perspective of Africa and how it is actually being viewed. And then I transitioned then to what it means to be African American. I talk a little bit about the one drop rule. I talk about biracial identity and how the U.S. Census has actually changed to recognize um, people of multiple races. Um, and then I also talk about the Back to Africa movement in the 1920s, which was led by Marcus Garvey. Um, and that was mostly about how he argued that African Americans could only attain social equality by moving back to Africa, and that how he saw that continent as the only place where self emancipation could be attained. So it was quite an interesting topic. It helped me to look more at Malcolm X, um, and a lot of his views, specifically um, one quote that I'll share with you right now. It says, "We didn't want anybody telling us about Africa, much less calling us Africans. In hating Africa and in hating the Africans, we ended up hating ourselves without even realizing it. Because you can't hate the roots of a tree and not hate the tree. You can't hate your origin and not end up hating yourself. You can't hate Africa and not hate yourself." So, I think that was kind of a resounding message for me and it was very, very impactful. Um, but in my research, I also found that I had misconceptions about Malcolm X as well. Um, how our community has portrayed him as just being this totally rebellious and defiant person, when the reality of it is his thoughts, his perspectives were far beyond were very deep in a sense, and far beyond anything that I could have imagined that they were. So I guess my research has also helped me to dispel a lot of these misconceptions of a lot of people that I had painted a negative image of, and in a historical context, it has helped me to view Africa in a new light, um, to understand more of the experience of African Americans, and to be honest with you, um, to even identify more with African Americans, even as a foreigner living in America. So, um, you have an opportunity now to share your thoughts. I thank you for your time. Hopefully, my message or my conveyance of the message wasn't too convoluted, but I thank you for your time. Have a good night.